In December 1941, German tanks were just 12 miles away from Moscow. Field Marshal Fedor von Bock just led a campaign of unprecedented success against the Soviet Union. "Victory is within our grasp," he proclaimed confidently. Yet within days, Bock would be relieved of his command. This is the story of a field marshal who came closest to defeating the Soviet Union, only to find his ambitions crushed not by the enemy, but by his own Führer. Fedor von Bock was born on December 3, 1880 in Kustrin, Prussia, into a family with a rich military heritage. His father, Moritz von Bock, had commanded troops during the Franco-Prussian War, and his uncle, Max von Bock and Pollack, would lead German armies in World War I. This background set the stage for Fedor's military career, which began at the age of 8, when he entered the Gross-Lichterfeld Cadet Academy in Berlin. By the outbreak of World War I in 1914, Bock had attained the rank of captain. During the conflict, he demonstrated exceptional tactical skills, particularly in mobile warfare. His leadership earned him Prussia's highest military decoration, the Pour le Mérite. The aftermath of Germany's defeat in World War I had a profound impact on Bock. The humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles and the collapse of the German monarchy challenged his deeply rooted sense of loyalty to the crown. During the 1920s, Bock found himself involved in the development of the Black Reichswehr, a secret army that allowed Germany to maintain its military capabilities despite treaty restrictions. As Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power in the 1930s, Bock faced a moral dilemma. As a monarchist, he held little personal affinity for the Nazi ideology. However, his sense of duty ultimately led him to serve the new regime. As the 1930s progressed, Bock's reputation as a skilled tactician made him an invaluable asset to the rapidly expanding Wehrmacht. His expertise in mobile warfare played a crucial role in the development of German military strategy. By 1939, on the eve of World War II, Bock was ready to lead Germany's armies in Poland, marking the beginning of a conflict that would reshape the world. Bock's career under the Nazi regime exemplifies the moral compromises made by many German military leaders of his generation. While he may not fully have embraced Nazi ideology, his willingness to serve the regime contributed significantly to Germany's early wartime successes. As Europe stood on the brink of war in September 1939, Bock led Army Group North in the German invasion of Poland. The operation showcased the Wehrmacht's revolutionary approach to warfare, combining speed, coordination, and overwhelming force. Bock's forces, including General Georg von Kuchler's Third Army and General Günther von Kluge's Fourth Army, executed a campaign that shocked the world and set the stage for the larger conflict to come. The Polish campaign demonstrated the effectiveness of Germany's blitzkrieg tactics. Bock's forces moved with unprecedented speed, overwhelming Polish defenses and shattering their ability to mount effective counterattacks. In just 5 weeks, Poland fell to the combined might of German and Soviet forces. The cost to Poland was devastating, with 531 towns and villages left in ruins by the end of the occupation. In May 1940, Bock assumed command of Army Group B for the invasion of France. The German High Command devised a bold plan to bypass the Maginot Line, the heavily fortified defensive line built by France along its eastern border. Bock's forces played a pivotal role in executing this strategy, which caught the Allies off guard and led to a spectacular German victory. In a mere 6 weeks, France, long considered one of Europe's strongest military powers, was brought to its knees. On July 19, 1940, Hitler promoted Bock to Field Marshal in recognition of his leadership. However, tensions between Bock and Hitler began to simmer beneath the surface. These tensions would come to a head during Operation Barbarossa, launched in June 1941, with Bock commanding Army Group Center to capture Moscow. Initially, Bock's forces met with tremendous success, advancing rapidly and capturing key cities like Minsk and Smolensk. However, strategic disagreements between Bock and Hitler intensified. Bock argued for a direct and rapid drive toward Moscow. Believing that maintaining momentum was crucial, he exclaimed, "We are permitting our greatest chance of success to escape us by this restriction placed on our armor." Hitler, however, insisted on large-scale encirclement battles to destroy Soviet armies before pushing deeper into Russian territory. This approach led to increasing friction between Bock and Hitler. Bock, like many generals, believed that their window of opportunity to defeat the Soviet Union was limited, and that every day increased the risks to the entire operation. In the autumn of 1941, Bock prepared to launch Operation Typhoon, a massive offensive aimed at capturing Moscow. On September 30th, he unleashed a force of approximately 1.5 million men, surpassing even the initial strength of Operation Barbarossa. This final push towards the Soviet capital represented Germany's last chance to secure victory before winter set in. The operation began with impressive gains. Bock's forces achieved significant encirclements at Vyazma and Bryansk, resulting in the capture of around 650,000 Soviet soldiers. However, these early successes were soon overshadowed by mounting challenges that would test the limits of the German war machine. As autumn approached, Bock's concerns became apparent. The delays proved costly as German forces finally resumed their advance towards Moscow. By mid-October, the weather turned against the invaders, turning unpaved roads into treacherous mud bogs. German tanks and trucks were swallowed by the mud. The German forces spent more time pushing vehicles than fighting. The once mighty panzer divisions crawled forward at less than 2 miles per day, drastically slowing the German advance and giving the Soviets valuable time to strengthen their defenses. Bock, frustrated by the slowing advance, ordered a series of flanking maneuvers to bypass the worst of the mud. These tactical decisions, while initially successful, further strained already overstretched supply lines. Reports indicated that around 35,000 men, 250 tanks, and several hundred vehicles were lost due to the mud and poor supply situation. As temperatures plummeted, reaching as low as -45 degrees Celsius, the German soldiers faced a new enemy, the Russian winter. Meanwhile, Moscow's defenses were rapidly strengthening. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, newly appointed to lead the city's defense, mobilized civilians to construct defensive belts around the capital. Factory workers were armed and formed into militia units, while women dug anti-tank ditches and erected barricades. Despite these setbacks, Bock pressed on toward Moscow. However, as the Germans inched closer, they encountered increasingly stiff Soviet resistance. The German advance slowed to a crawl around Mozhaisk, where panic gripped Moscow and civilians began to evacuate the city. On December 6, 1941, as the German forces struggled to maintain their positions, Zhukov launched a massive counteroffensive. The Soviet attack caught the exhausted and frozen German troops off guard, forcing them into a desperate retreat. By December 13th, Bock's forces had been pushed back more than 80 kilometers from Moscow. The retreat was catastrophic for the Wehrmacht. German records show that during this period, the Army Group Center lost over 100,000 men, 300 tanks, and thousands of vehicles and artillery pieces. Bock's Operation Typhoon had failed, marking a turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. The myth of German invincibility was shattered, and the Soviet Union had survived its darkest hour. The failure of Operation Typhoon marked a turning point for Bock, with consequences reaching far beyond the battlefield. On December 18, 1941, Hitler dismissed Bock from his command of Army Group Center, citing health problems. However, the truth behind this decision was more complex, stemming from Hitler's shaken confidence in his generals and Bock's outspoken nature. Despite this setback, Bock's military career continued. On January 20, 1942, he received command of Army Group South following the death of Field Marshal Walter von Reichenau. This assignment proved to be Bock's final opportunity to demonstrate his tactical skills on the Eastern Front. In May 1942, Bock's leadership was tested during the Second Battle of Kharkov. Soviet forces launched a winter offensive against Army Group South, but Bock orchestrated a masterful defense. He successfully repelled the attack and inflicted significant losses on the Soviet forces. On June 28, 1942, Bock's offensive split the Russian front near Kursk. In response, the Soviet High Command established the Voronezh Front under Nikolai Vatutin, who reported directly to Moscow. Bock sought to neutralize Vatutin's forces quickly to avoid leaving his own positions stretched and vulnerable as the German offensive pressed forward. However, Hitler opposed the idea of postponing the advance on Stalingrad, and with that, the tensions between Bock and Hitler escalated. Their disagreements over strategy and tactics reached a breaking point. On July 7th, Hitler reorganized Army Group South, splitting it into Army Groups A and B. Field Marshal Wilhelm List was assigned command of Army Group A. On July 17, 1942, Hitler dismissed Bock from his command of Army Group B, ending his active military career. Bock's dismissal highlighted the ethical challenges faced by military leaders under the Nazi regime. Throughout his career, Bock balanced his professional duties with personal reservations about Nazi ideology. Unlike some generals, he chose not to join plots against Hitler, driven by his strong sense of duty and loyalty to the soldier's oath. Bock believed his oath bound him to serve the state and its leader, even when he disagreed with their actions. His reluctance also stemmed from his belief in military discipline and fear that a coup could spark a civil war. In the years following his dismissal, Bock faded into relative obscurity. The once prominent field marshal watched from a distance as the Reich he had served began to crumble. Bock lived in seclusion near Lübeck, reflecting on the war's course and his role in it. The final days of Bock's life were marked by tragedy. As the Russians advanced on Berlin in 1945, Bock was informed by Field Marshal Erich von Manstein that Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz was establishing a new government in Hamburg to negotiate with the approaching Allied forces. Acting on this information, Bock set out for Hamburg immediately. He spent the night in a mansion located in Petersdorf and departed early the following morning. On May 3, 1945, as the war in Europe was coming to an end, Bock's car was strafed by a Royal New Zealand Air Force fighter bomber. The attack resulted in the deaths of his wife and stepdaughter, his chauffeur, as well as a traveling companion. Bock himself was severely injured and taken to the Naval Hospital in Oldenburg. That evening, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein visited him. Bock's final words to his friend were, "Manstein, save Germany." Fedor von Bock passed away the following day. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this video informative. If you enjoyed learning about today's topic, make sure to check out our other videos about German generals. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more World War II content. That's an order.